We've prepared a report. We've told the police why they need to act. We've reminded the police what their responsibilities are. We even took parts of the criminal code verbatim and told them, this is how you define a crime, and these are how you define criminals. Because you don't necessarily have to be the bank robber to be guilty of bank robbery. If you worked at the bank and you left the door unlocked the night before on purpose and let the robber in, even though you didn't show up with a gun and steal the money, you're responsible. And so we've told the police all this. We told them the timing of the crimes. We told them who we believed in Manitoba was responsible. So we set this up in exactly the same way that commercial crime is taken to the police and they act on it. So that's what's happened with regard to what their process might be. Generally speaking, they get involved, they bring on experts, and they'll ask for testimony. And I would be full well expecting that I would testify and appear in court, and we would bring further witnesses as well.
Tamara Ugolini here with Rebel News, and as more Canadians start to question the science that was actually used around the panic and pandemonium generated by the government's COVID-19 response, I'm going to bring you a report compiled by a gentleman named Ken Drysdale. He is the spokesperson for an 89-page forensic report that is titled Investigation into Criminal Allegations Concerning COVID-19 Response. Using the government's own data, the report dissects the overall handling of the last 2 years and questions if the government was making rational, evidence-based decisions. Without further ado, meet Ken Drysdale.
Well, I'm a professional engineer with over 40 years of experience. And for the past 40 years or so, I've been involved with, among other things, creating expert engineering reports. And those reports may have been used in court cases. They may have been used in arbitrations or insurance claims or just to settle disputes between people. So we used to say around the office, if something broke, fell down, or blew up, they would phone me and I would come in and figure out what was going on. And so it was 40 years of training and doing that type of work. I've also been involved in a wide variety of things in Canada and around the world. I've worked in places like Egypt and Russia, Kazakhstan. I was taken on by the National Research Council between 2009 and 2015 as one of the authors of the National Building Code in 2015. I'm the current chairman of the Building Advisory Committee in Nunavut. So I've done a lot of work, both public and private, and around the world.
Now, getting right into this document, 89 pages. I mean, it's a massive document to try to sift through. There's a lot here. Can you tell us the basis, summarize what the gist of the document is?
Well, there's a couple of things. There's the intent of the document and then what's in the document. And I think your viewers would really find it interesting to go through. It looks at government messaging and tries to determine whether it's clear or whether it's honest. It looks at statistics, mortality statistics specifically, and comparing 2019 and 2020. Of course, 2019 was before the pandemic occurred, and 2020 was when we got hit by it the first time, and there were no therapeutic treatments, there were no vaccines to muddy the waters with regard to the statistics. We also looked at ICU bed usage. We looked at what planning that the Canadian government had done prior to the pandemic. In other words, were they prepared? Did they take steps? Those are the kinds of things that we looked at it, and again, what we found out was just shocking. It was just completely, I can't describe it any other way. The totality of the fraud was overwhelming to us.
Now, I want to break down some of those separate components there, because when you looked at the ICU beds, for instance, and your report is specific to Manitoba, you're in Manitoba, and you're planning on rolling out this report to make it specific for each province. But right now, this is the one that we have. And so what did you find specifically about the ICU beds and the capacity there, dating back even decades prior to the pandemic and then fast forward into today?
Well, it was really interesting, and we had no idea what we were going to find out. Once again, we just kind of went where the evidence took us. And Manitoba was an unusual situation because we were able to get statistics for ICU beds. We have prepared a specific report for Ontario to date, and we couldn't get the ICU bed usage. But with regard to Manitoba, back in 2006, there was 118 ICU beds available in Manitoba. and our population was 1.14 million people at the time. Bring us up to 2019, just before the pandemic hit, we were up to 1.37 million people. In other words, an increase in population of around a quarter of a million, little less than a quarter of a million. And by the fall of 2019, our ICU beds were down to 55. Now, even in 2006 or 2007, when we had 118 ICU beds, we were still quite a bit below the Canadian average. I think we're 13 or 14% below the Canadian average ICU beds per population. In October of 2019, when the government closed down the ICU beds in the Seven Oaks General Hospital, it brought us down to 55. And that brought us to a ratio of hospital or ICU beds compared to population on par with China. United States, that brought us down to about 4 ICU beds per 100,000 population. And in comparison, and this is all in the report, by the way, in comparison, the United States has about 35 ICU beds per 100,000. I'm just looking at my notes. Great Britain, Germany, 29. The average in Canada was 13 and a half, and we were down to about 4.
Wow.
Now, but that's not all. It was worse than that. According to Freedom of Information request that we got from the NDP opposition, the Winnipeg Regional Health Authority, which is the largest health authority in Manitoba, reported that they only had staffing for 50% of the positions that they required in order to staff those 55 beds. So it was reducing the numbers beyond where they should have, and then it was not staffing the beds. And that was on top of them having studies starting back as far as 2012 that said that the requirement for ICU beds in Canada was increasing by a rate of about 12% every year in about a 5 or 6 year period. So they knew the ICU bed requirements were going up. They had done studies on it. They actually did a study about H1N1 and said lessons learned, and they talked about all these things in it, and they didn't learn any lessons. They wrote a report that cost I don't know how much money. But again, it was just shocking, the totality of what they did that was wrong, and right up as late as October of 2019.
And then they also disregarded, you discuss here in this document, the previously established Canadian pandemic influenza response plan. Can you elaborate on what you investigated and dug up there?
Well, the Canadian influenza pandemic plan was done in 2006, and the chief author of that was Theresa Tam, and a number of other people who are health officers across Canada were also named as authors. And as a matter of fact, there's 9 full pages of authorship. It's a 661-page report, and just about they described in their pandemic plan almost to the letter what happened here, what happened in 2020. And they also examined all kinds of things like masking, isolation, antivirals, and in almost every single case, what they recommended in the influenza plan, they did the opposite in 2020, 2021, and 22. So, they said, don't mask. They said, there's no point in having lockdowns because it's already in the community. They actually stockpiled antivirals, and I'm not sure of this number, but I read somewhere it was around $28 to $30 million worth of antivirals that they stockpiled, which they didn't use. So it was amazing what again, and I think the message that your viewers need to get out of this is the totality of whatever it was, whether it was fraud or malfeasance. It's not for me to say, that's for the courts to say, but it was just the totality in everything that they did.
And the basis of your report as well, you don't question the PCR testing parameters, you don't question the case counts, the numbers. You are just taking raw government data and compiling it and presenting it in this report. Can you elaborate also on why you chose to just do it, straightforward and verbatim as per the government's own reporting systems?
Well, we can't go to experts. In the United States, Supreme Court judges can't say what a woman is. Experts will say anything depending on who's paying them. Unfortunately, that's the way it is now. So we figured out that if we just took the government's own statistics, we went to Statistics Canada, We didn't go to some of these other statistical sources that are available on the internet. We went directly to Statistics Canada. We looked at the mortality rates. We went directly to the Manitoba COVID response website, and we got their own information bulletins. We got what they were reporting as vaccine fatalities. We used all that information exactly as they presented it. So if they said there was 10 COVID deaths, we didn't say it was less, we didn't say it was more, and we all know there's all kinds of controversy about the testing and how they diagnosed COVID and who died of COVID or died with COVID. We didn't question any of that. We just took their numbers. And the idea was, let's see what those numbers tell us. Is it consistent with the message that we were being given? Is it consistent with the risks that we took on, both as each as individuals and as a society? So that was the basis of it. And what we found was shocking once again.
Well, please elaborate on what you found.
Well, for instance, the government essentially told us that if you were above the age of 70 years old and you got COVID, it was a death sentence. So what we did is we looked at the mortality rates in that age group in 2019. And it turns out in 2019, if you were 70 years of age and older in Canada, you had a 1 in 32 chance of dying from whatever the cause. And in 2020, when COVID struck, you had a 1 in 324 chance of dying, of contracting and dying of COVID. So your chances of just dying were 10 times higher than your chances of dying of COVID. And the other statistics we found in there was that 43% of all of the people that reported to have died from COVID had at least 3 or more comorbidities. And that's significant because they didn't really try to account for what caused the death. They simply said if you tested positive for COVID and you died within a certain period of time, then the death was attributed to COVID.
You know, as you've already highlighted here, there's some very key facts that need to be investigated. So what does that process look like now? You've compiled this document. What's next?
Well, it's interesting. You know, we sent it out in mid part of April. We sent it out by registered mail to every police station in Manitoba, RCMP, local police. We followed up on it. We've had people right across the country sending it into their local police stations, dropping it off in person. On our website, www.thetruefactsc19.com, you'll find a blog posting, and they'll show videos of people going into police stations and presenting it. Every single member of parliament has it. Every MLA's had it in Manitoba. Every senator in Ottawa has got it. And what we've got there is silence, except for the police. The police have been interesting. It's been a mixed bag. We were told by the police in Winnipeg that it was an excellent report, and they had decided they were going to meet with us. So we were choosing a neutral location and a time. Then they came back to us and said, well, wait a minute, we can't accept this report because Mr. Drysdale he's not a resident of the city of Winnipeg. And we said, wait a minute, are you telling me that if somebody who's not a resident of Winnipeg is walking down the street and sees a murder, they can't report it because they're not a resident? And they kind of dumbly said yes. And then we said, okay. And then we went out looking for residents of Winnipeg, and in our blog we requested people. We got about a dozen people from Winnipeg, ex-police officers, ex-RCMP, who are signing the report. It's going to go back to the city of Winnipeg. But that's not even the funniest thing. Ironically, a few days after that, I get a phone call from Winnipeg Police, Major Crimes Unit. They wanted to question me about what I knew about someone had delivered the report to someone that they weren't supposed to or shouldn't have, and I'm not sure why that was. But it was interesting that they were phoning me, a non-resident of Winnipeg, for potential evidence on a crime in Winnipeg when they told me they couldn't do that because I wasn't a resident of Winnipeg. Now, if you could follow that, you're smarter than I am. But, you know, and I know we're running out of time, but I do want to make a point here. This report's gone out and it's been reproduced thousands and thousands of times, coast to coast. It's gone to every MP, it's gone to every senator multiple times. But what we've done is we've not just created another report for you to see. We have a lot of those, but what we've created a toolkit for folks, ordinary folks. They can download the report from our site. They can download infographics pages. We even have little business cards that they can download and print, and then they can hand out if they're at a doctor's office or they're at, I'm just looking for one now, sorry. Here it is. So they can download these off of our website. They can print a bunch and put them in their wallet, and they can hand them out. They can print the report. And I'm not saying print it out and send it out 500 times. Print it out and give it out once. Walk down to your constituency office and say, we want an investigation here. Make sure you get the name of the person that you dropped it off to and let us know through our website. You guys can let us know on our website. But we've created a tool that will only work if thousands and thousands of Canadians get behind this thing. And they are. You know, I'm getting emails from coast to coast, from Victoria to St. John's. You can participate in this. You have the ability to make a difference, and we are.
Now, thank you, Ken, for reiterating those important points. I just want to know, what does this process look like? I mean, if the police decide to undertake an investigation of this magnitude, what does this process look like going forward?
Well, it's actually interesting. I've been involved in those before because a lot of people don't realize it, but the police don't necessarily have certain capabilities to investigate certain kinds of crime. For instance, like commercial fraud. And in a commercial fraud case, normally what happens is that the victim will get lawyers and forensic accountants, and they'll prepare an expert report, and they'll submit that to the police. The police will review it, and then they will take on whatever resources they need to take it further. And that's exactly the process that we've undertaken. We've prepared a report. We've told the police why they need to act. We've reminded the police what their responsibilities are. We even took parts of the criminal code verbatim and told them, this is how you define a crime, and these are how you define criminals. Because you don't necessarily have to be the bank robber to be guilty of bank robbery. If you worked in the bank and you left the door unlocked the night before on purpose and let the robber in, even though you didn't show up with a gun and steal the money, you're responsible. And so we've told the police all this. We told them the timing of the crimes. We told them who we believed in Manitoba was responsible. So we set this up in exactly the same way that commercial crime is taken to the police and they act on it. So that's what's happened with regard to what their process might be. Generally speaking, they get involved, they bring on experts, and they'll ask for testimony. And I would be full well expecting that I would testify and appear in court, and we would bring further witnesses as well.
Do you think the holdup here could have anything to do with the fact that police have been so complacent and even enforcers of a lot of this COVID regime and the handling that we've seen unfold in Canada specifically?
It's specifically politics, and I know it is. And I'm not conjecturing that. It's the truth. RCMP also told us, it was an excellent report. They were willing to meet with us, and we were setting up a time and place for that meeting. And when we called to confirm, the RCMP officer we were dealing with in major crimes unit said, "I'm out. I don't want anything to do with this anymore." So obviously that came from the top. And I have a message to the police, rank and file police, because I keep hearing things like, it's not the rank and file, it's the administration. And that's true. But I remind rank and file police, every single one of you, we as citizens give you tremendous power. We let you carry a gun. We give you the opportunity and the right to stop people and arrest them. And you don't have the courage to stand up against something that you know is wrong because you're worried about your pension. That might be an acceptable decision for someone like me who makes his life sharpening pencils or something, because society gives us a certain amount of respect and responsibility depending on what our position is. And the same is for the rank and file doctors. You have a responsibility. Society generally treats doctors like gods. And that requires a certain responsibility, that you can't be worried about your pension. You have to stand up for us because of the responsibility we put into you. So again, that's a message to not just, and I agree, it's all politics. It's all politics and it's fear. Rank and file doctors, police, all kinds of other people are afraid of their pensions. Well, a lot of us are afraid of our pensions. A lot of us are afraid of our jobs. But they have special responsibility. You might call it fiduciary responsibility to act and to protect us and to hold up the charter, which they have not done.
Ken makes powerful arguments that reinforce with data what many have speculated since the onset of the pandemic, that the government and their legacy media have been the leader of both mis- and disinformation throughout the COVID narrative. He and I also discussed the specifics around the risk versus benefit of COVID balanced with the unknowns of the vaccine rollout for pregnant women. So please stay tuned for that separate report. For Rebel News, I'm Tamara Ugolini. Despite all of the mounting evidence showing the ineffectiveness and cruelty of vaccine mandates, the managers at Tim Hortons Camp Foundation are still enforcing full vaccination of all youth attending their summer camps. To sign our petition urging the Human Resources Department to abolish this segregationist policy, head over to letkidscamp.com. At that special website, you can see all of my recent reports and sign the petition to stay up to date and also to oppose this policy. That website again is letkidscamp.com.